I propose new metrics. Could talk about just happiness and well-being, long-term well-being. It's pretty easy for Facebook, for YouTube, for all these companies to measure that. They do a lot of kinds of surveys. And for them to give you the technology to do self-report of what makes you grow as a person, of what makes you the best version of yourself. But you have this happiness surveys of how you feel about the last 5 days. How would you report your experience?
You have to choose, you have to accept that you will go through and you will assess, self-assess your well-being across some large number of dimensions. Right? So things like the degree to which you feel like you're living according to your own values, the degree to which you feel like you are actually attending to the relationships that are most meaningful and important to you, the degree to which you feel like you're taking good care of your own body and physical well-being, the degree to which you feel like you're actually able to achieve creative expression into the world, things like that. And it's a survey, and it takes some time. You choose when and how often you want to engage in this survey. What we're trying to do is we're actually trying to create a transformation between the fungible, narrow dimensional, in this case one token, right, money, one dimensional mode of money, mode of currency, mode of how we sense value and share value out in the world, and actually connect that to a second mode of economy that is qualitative in nature, that has a high dimensionality and strict non-fungibility. All right, so let's talk about that second mode, this high dimensional subjective well-being assessment as base. That's the joint, is that survey. And of course, every single time that you take the survey, it creates a temporal snapshot of the kind of the undulation of your subjective well-being through time. Right? So we're not just looking at a particular moment, we're also looking at how it happens over time. The other piece is what I call the Serendipity Engine. Right? And this is something like what Facebook would be, or what Twitter would be, or what LinkedIn would be, if they were designed with maximizing human flourishing in mind. So it's, at a technical level, actually not that hard to imagine.
It's pretty easy for Facebook, for YouTube, for all these companies to measure that. It's actually, I think, especially in the world of tech, quite doable. You just might not like, the shareholders may not like that kind of metric, but it's pretty easy to measure.
What do I mean by that? What I mean is it's a machine learning system that takes the state of well-being of given individuals and uses that to suggest potential high-quality encounters. And perhaps you and person A and person B could be in some particular kind of encounter, and that would maximize both of their trajectories of well-being. That's the engine, that's the Serendipity Engine's intent, purpose, and design constraint to do that. And of course, there's a mechanism whereby we go about looking at the degree to which a particular set of encounters actually did, over the short, medium, long term, perhaps statistically, lead to an upgradient in the individual and collective subjective well-being. Right? So if the Serendipity Engine puts us into encounter, or at least suggests those as possibilities, and we take those offers up and we do so, and our assessment of well-being shows stagnation or degradation, then it's not doing a good job, and we might want to look into why that's happening. If, on the other hand, it does show it, in fact, think about this from a serendipity perspective, it actually shows statistically an upgradient across a much larger field of people than just the two of us. That's interesting. That's the kind of stuff we're looking for, synergistic satisfiers. The assessment, the self-assessment, has a bunch of different values. Probably the most important is just the process of doing the check-in yourself. Right? Just to take the time to do the work of comparing what you believe are your core values, what you believe are your most meaningful relationships, and okay, am I living them? Am I living them well? Am I doing a better job? Is my sovereignty increasing? And just having that subjective check-in on a periodic basis by itself is very powerful. Secondarily, of course, is to create the data flow, some sort of stream of objective materiality of that high-dimensional field of well-being that we can then pump into some kind of machine learning system to support our joyful encounter. Every week, you will have some sort of conversation or encounter with another human being on the basis of what we propose is going to be an upgradient in your collective well-being. The hope and the intent is that the Serendipity Engine, which by the way can be a very large set of possible encounters, becomes the heartbeat of the economy, because it's the ability to both receive and to give along the lines of the gradient of your well-being is the strength of a qualitative economy. How do we actually get to the highest quality encounters? Well, the highest quality encounters are circumstances where each individual, which could in fact, by the way, be groups of people in complex relationships, simultaneously have enough gradient in their well-being by what they are giving into the relationship and by what they are receiving from the relationship. So the hope is that mode 2 ultimately becomes the most foundational. Right? So we have a bit of an interesting temporal dynamic. In the beginning, most, if not all, of your actual day-to-day well-being will have to be provided by the token, the money, the single-dimensional fungible mode 1 economy. But the hope is that over time, there's a movement more and more towards the second mode, and that it actually becomes the base, and that it actually becomes the base. To some extent, in fact, we move the token economy, the materials economy, the scarcity economy into a de minimis position, which it will always have. Attention and energy are finite. The atoms that we have access to are intrinsically scarce, and so there will always be something about that is part of the nature of economy. But it doesn't necessarily need to be the most fundamental basis of economy. Mode 3 is about how we actually use collective intelligence to most artfully, most skillfully, most thoughtfully change the possibility space of what we can do. So the structure of mode 3 involves a few basic components. One component is a proposal for what might be a good new thing to happen in the world. And this could be a very simple good new thing, like let's fill the pothole in the street. It might be a very complicated good new thing, like let's work on faster than light travel. Okay, so it's a proposal for what might be a good new thing in the world. Ideally, that particular form, like the little architecture, and think about this at like the technical level, like I'm building a user interface for how you submit these kinds of proposals to a data system, involves the way in which we collectively put our skin in the game, or put some stake against what we think are ripe and good designs. And by the way, valuable proposals. Right? So if I have a proposal and I have the first element of a design spec, at that point I can actually stake a token against that design spec. Now I can choose to stake the token at a very high level, the design spec in general, which basically just says I think the proposal is valuable. Or I can actually stake it in some precision down to a certain element in the design spec, or into some branching nodes. If I think of it like a tree, I can put it at the trunk, I can put it at a big branch, or I can put it all the way down to a leaf. And the point there is actually how I use my particular level of discernment and frankly even expertise to orient attention and identify intention around what I perceive as being both valuable and well considered. I think this is either a good risk to take or likely to be realized and actualized. Okay, so that mapping and modeling is an approach to a highly distributed collective intelligence method for surfacing the most meaningful values, how those values might actually be actualized or realized most usefully in change of state in world. And by the way, how we can actually go about engaging in or delivering on that change of state, which that design spec is simultaneously a how, but also a mirror that provides us more clarity on what we even mean by the what. You know, it's not until you've really specified something that you really know, oh yeah, we're talking about the same thing here. And then the economy, the tokens that allow us to say, okay, everybody has exactly the same right and frankly value in orienting what we think are the best changes to make in the world. Does that make sense? I hope so. And every design specification includes within it, by necessity, a governance mechanism whereby human agents are able to evaluate proposed solutions. Right? So I've got a design spec for how to go to Mars, And inside that design spec, there is a mechanism whereby some group of people, which could be a very large distributed, everybody who's contributed has a vote, or it can be very small. Only Elon Musk has a vote. Its design spec actually has to include that governance element. So then I come along and I say, you know what? I have a proposal for how to solve this piece of that design. That activates the governance mechanism. The governance mechanism evaluates my proposal and engages in some action. Yes, here's the tokens that we have the ability to distribute that have been allocated to this governance mechanism are now unlocked for you to execute on your proposal, or are unlocked as a reward for the fact that you've already delivered on the value that we're looking at. And it's basically a comparison between the expected value of what I propose and the design specifications of what has been identified as what needs to happen, evaluated by whatever the governance mechanism happens to be. And that's that, except for one important element. And I'm pretty sure this is true. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure. And that's that neither the people who actually engage in the work, nor the people who are engaging in the governance, nor the people who staked tokens is permitted to have a windfall or even a significant return for the time and energy they actually put into what they're doing. So if you did the work, let's say it's the pothole example to make it a little bit simpler. We need a pothole filled. There's 300 tokens allocated to it. I'm like, you know what? I'll do that work. I'll fill the pothole. I can get something like time and materials. Think of it almost like a government contract. I can get the time I put into it is repaid, and the materials that I used is repaid, and maybe some small percentage, like 8 or 10 or 15% on top of that. So that there's a small motivation, a small incentive. But the point is, in fact, and this actually is one of the challenges that we face in innovation space is recklessness. People innovating too well, too fast, without enough care. And in the threshold and the horizon that we're on right now, that's potentially catastrophic. We have to be very, very careful. So we want people to explore the possibility space, the adjacent possible, and think about how we might be able to change the world in a way that supports our ongoing upgradient of individual and collective well-being. We want that. But we don't want over-incentive. We don't want people to be competing with each other recklessly. We don't want people to feel like they can actually do X and have now a massive flow of resources, which frankly bends the entire economy in a way that may actually not be in alignment with what is the best perspective of the collective intelligence. So what we want is to say, hey, Elon Musk, you want to go to Mars because you believe that's a good thing. If you made $0, in fact, clearly if you had to actually impoverish yourself to ultimately achieve the objective that has been bugging you since you were a child. And what happened in our collective process is we actually supported you in doing that, and we enabled you to get there, and we brought to you other human beings who deeply felt passionate about that, but who are collaborating in a space of clarity, not in a space of competition over who gets to win the biggest resources, but in a space of how do we actually achieve values, realize values that we all believe are important, and deliver on a design that we all believe is effective. So it's actually important, perhaps even crucial, that the economic return for delivering on innovation is sort of nice, but not strong, not big. Too much thumb on that scale leads to a breakneck pace, and more importantly, leads to a perturbation in the wholeness of evaluation of the collective intelligence. A lot of the output of the Serendipity Engine would be orienting people towards possible design specifications that would actually be deeply associated with their own collective well-being. Here's a collaborative group that's working on an amazing project where your particular gifts are deeply needed and where they have capacities that will support you in realizing your deepest values. I mean, that's the biggest win-win imaginable. And that's the kind of organic output of what happens when you do opening up that field of information about quality and you feed the Serendipity Engine until it gets good at suggesting those kinds of things. And then we're collectively identifying the most valuable, most purposeful potential activities and designing them in a way that begins to create some precision about what kinds of skills and capacities and expertise work well together, are needed to actually deliver on this particular set of values and purposes. If you look at the well-being economy, what you're looking at is something that is designed to do that job really, really well, right? To really support people from their own sovereignty, right? Not coming from a, hey, you should do this, but okay, you're invited to reflect on how you yourself can identify the things that are holding you back. What we should expect to see is a dramatic increase in the quality of collaboration, the ability to be flexible in your models of how the world works, and not to be to kind of give up or be foolish, but actually exactly how do you engage in sharing of insight with other people so as to have a synergistic collaboration that increases the insight together. So that's the hope, right? The hope is that the construct fundamentally generates a way for us to radically unlock human potential, particularly along the mode of well-being, giving and receiving, and along the mode of thoughtful, careful, not reckless, but deeply powerful change in the state of how the world works, or what the field of possibility actually looks like for us. And of course, to the degree to which we do that, flourishing should be also dramatically accelerated. And I mean that in both ways, which is to say, our ability to unlock energy and resources, scarce environments, should be dramatically increased. Right? The things that have happened over the past 3 industrial revolutions that have increased our access to material plenty, we should be able to continue the possibility of vastly, dramatically increasing our ability to easily provide every human with material plenty without at all negatively impacting the environment is at the threshold of the adjacent possible. Mostly we're held back by our mechanism of economy, to be perfectly frank, and we're held back by a lot of stuff going on in our interiors and the ways that we individually still operate from a scarcity mentality.
I know because I know you'll never change your mind. I wanna be your brother, but I fear